and thanks for joining us here on SF Live. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Tonight we have a wonderful special guest with us this evening. We have Senator Mark Leno. How are you, Senator?
Christina, good to be with you.
Very good to be with you. Excellent. I just found out that Mark is actually my neighbor in Noe Valley.
I understand we've been neighbors for decades.
For decades. And why
decades.
have I not seen you?
Why have I not seen you?
He's been working hard. That's why. So where is it that you originally grew up?
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And finished high school there.
Uh-huh.
And then left and went off to pursue my higher education and then my young adult life, landing in San Francisco in February of 1977.
1977.
Midst of a drought, very serious drought.
Ah, yes.
Yes, it was sunny and about 65 every day of February, March, April. And given that I had just left the coldest winter on record in New York, I thought I'd come to heaven. And little did I know it was a drought, and it shouldn't have been like that. And then, of course, when the fog came in May, June, I didn't know what that was.
You're like, what is that stuff coming down the hills?
Why is it so cold?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, back up a little bit for me.
Yes.
With your family, was your family very politically active? Did you talk politics around the dinner table? Was it that kind of
It was
way
a
you grew up?
well-informed family, and we did have meals, dinners together. And so, in fact, I remember I printed like a little news sheet for my fourth grade class with all the headlines and the top stories and shared it with my classroom. So I liked being involved at a policy level from an early age. But no one was in office, no one was involved with party politics, but we were good Dems from the beginning, sure.
And when you arrived in San Francisco, what was it like in 1977 for those who had not grown up here and wanted to know what it's like?
Well, historically we know it was the disco 70s.
The Disco 70. Oh, I remember that, yes. A lot of spandex.
It was wild, and it was a liberating time. It was a liberating time. And given that I came out in 1969, which was the Stonewall riots year, which is the demarcation date of the modern LGBT civil rights movement, I've always thought of myself as a Stonewall baby. And so my young adult life mirrored the historical first steps of the civil rights movement. So it really was a very liberating and extraordinary time, unlike anything I think anyone had seen. And certainly we were all experiencing it for the first time because we were all 20, 25, 30 years old. And of course, Harvey Milk was elected to office the very following year and then subsequently assassinated. So it was a very meaningful, powerful experience. I remember there was a columnist, Charles McCabe. I don't know if you would have remembered. Charles McCabe wrote a column in the San Francisco Chronicle, and he was of the old guard. He was old San Francisco. He lived on Telegraph Hill. And of the Irish descent, of course, who had earlier really run San Francisco for so many decades. And Charles McCabe was not pleased with what was happening to his town with the gay liberation movement following all of the summer of love activities in the late 60s, which of course in many ways was the precursor to LGBT civil rights unfolding in the 70s. So Charles McCabe wrote a series of columns with the headline, "Sex in the Streets."
Wow.
And he was appalled, just appalled that there was sex in the streets. And I remember following all of this and, shrugging it off. And then I went to a Castro street fair one year. And what I do remember about the 70s, whether it was the Pride Parade or street fairs or whatever, they were great times to, shall I say, meet people and get names and phone numbers.
Oh, definitely. It was
kind of
crazy.
Like Halloween when you go out trick-or-treating and then you can hoard all your candy for a few months. You can just go out to a couple of street fairs and you meet all these people, get names and numbers, and you've got a social life for the next 6 months. So I remember just meeting a wonderful young man one afternoon, and we're at the Castro Street Fair, and as the day devolves, of course, there's more and more drinking and beer cans in the street and such, and suddenly, passion overtook us, and there I was leaning against a wall kissing this young man, and I thought, oh my God, you never planned on it, but suddenly sex in the street.
That's it.
It
You were the
happens.
poster
It
child for
happens,
that. That whole time, that whole energy of the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, the whole Castro area. Then we get into a darker area, and with the AIDS epidemic, and it's very interesting because I see my daughter is gay, and my daughter's come out, and she is so free and open to do whatever she wants now, and really with acceptance from the city, but doesn't realize what the struggle was.
What came before?
Yes, Can you talk about that a little bit, just as far as you came out at a time that you really did have to work with this and get people to recognize that it was fine and it should not be judged? And did you come up against anything
Well,
really
the
difficult?
struggle is ongoing, as we all well know, and so much of it now sitting in the hands of our California State Supreme Court. I think that the really visceral, it was such a real response to the passage of Prop 8 this past November. After the elation of electing Barack Obama president, the facts settled in that Californians had passed Proposition 8, and we saw a spontaneous outpouring to the streets of many younger people, I'm saying 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds maybe, who'd never really been involved with street action before. They'd never had a civil right taken from them, and they had just grown up with all of this relative acceptance here in the city, of course, and with the complete understanding that everyone was a first-class citizen and we all respect each other and live and celebrate our diversity. Suddenly to have the voters say no, and people reacted and responded in a very real way. I think, of course, we would never have chosen for that chapter to unfold it as it has, but the silver lining in it, I think, is that we now have a mobilized generation of younger people who would otherwise not have been. So I think that there's always something. I look for that positive thing even in the darkest. So no, we of course have been fighting for many, many decades. And as you pointed out, when the HIV/AIDS epidemic hit in the late 70s, early 80s, it was like smashing into a brick wall because no one knew what it was or how to even digest such the magnitude of it. When you could, the streets of the Castro, which were so celebratory for so many years with so many beautiful, energetic young people, to see the face of death just come over it so very quickly, and you'd see someone you'd just seen a few weeks earlier suddenly 20, 30, 40 pounds lighter, and no one knew what was going on. We didn't identify the virus until 1984, so we were literally living in the dark, and there were all the suppositions as to what could have caused it. Was it poppers? South of Market was hit first, and was it because of what the community was doing there that caused it? Of course, we only came to realize that it was a virus and identified it as such in 1984, and that there could then be testing for it, of course, and we understood that it was transmitted sexually and that there were things you could do to make sure you didn't interact with the virus. But it was a very different decade from the 70s.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I did see that a lot of people that were the sex on the street, journalists and that kind of thing, are then going, aha,
Yeah,
see,
yeah, of
I
course.
told
It's
you.
God's wrath.
Yeah.
It's God's wrath.
And then distance again, once again, as you're starting to build bridges between the straight and the gay community, it seemed to push it apart again, to say that they had done something wrong and that's why this is happening.
But again, looking, as I called them, silver linings or small blessings, which is what the mother of my now deceased partner, Doug Jackson, pointed out, is she lost two sons to HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. First, her youngest son at age 22, and then my partner Doug when he was around 34. This is all in the span of about 4 years. Devastating for this mother and for her family. She would point out these small blessings along the way, but one of the small blessings was that there were a lot of people who came to help in every and any way possible. It was not the gay male community did not manage the first wave of the epidemic on its own. The lesbian community was there to hold hands and to be care providers. We raised a lot of money in the straight community as well as in the LGBT community. So even though it was devastating, there were alliances that were made, and real humanity was experienced during the darkest days of the epidemic.